First of all, committee, we had our committee rules that we had time to refer, and just wanted to get see if we could approve those committee rules. Do I have a motion to do so?
Move to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Motion from Senator Clifford. Do I have a second? Second from Senator Gossage. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, nay. So the committee rules have been adopted. Thank you very much. Now, I hear we have a number of bill requests today. So first we'll start with committee bill requests. I think Senator Murphy has some, so I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 25 RS 0395. It's an act concerning the National Guard. I have 25 RS 0274.
Hold on a second. Any objection or questions regarding the introduction of that bill? Seeing none, that bill is introduced.
Thank you. 25 RS 0274 is an act concerning financial services prohibiting discrimination.
Any objections or questions regarding the introduction of that bill? Seeing none, that is introduced.
And I have 25 RS 0251. It's an act concerning legal tender bill.
Any questions or objections to the introduction of that bill? Seeing none, that bill is introduced. Any other bill introductions? Senator Blue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 25 RS 0148, repealing the 3-mile radius for cities.
Any questions or objections to the introduction of that bill? Seeing none, that's introduced.
And then I have 25 RS 0530, which is giving those who live in the 3-mile radius voting rights.
Any questions or objections to the introduction of that bill? Seeing none, that is introduced. Other bill introductions. Senator Fasquedo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize I wasn't here yesterday. Welcome to the new members on the committee. Mr. Chairman, I have a bill introduction of the 25 RS 0328, Mr. Chairman, and this is a bill that would change the years that a homeless vet could, with an eviction notice, to change that look-back time on evictions to help with housing.
Okay, very good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions or objections to the introduction of that bill? Seeing none, that bill is introduced. Any other bill introductions? We have Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 25 RS 0112 that has to do with licensure for a drinking establishment.
Any questions or objections to the introduction of that bill? Seeing none, that bill is introduced. Any other bill introductions from the audience now? Oh, we'll go ahead. I think David, yeah, come on up. Just state your name and who you're with.
My name is David Schneider. I'm with Convention of States.
Okay.
I've got a bill introduced. It's 25 RS 0457. It's a resolution to take application from the state of Kansas to Congress to call a Convention of States to place further limits on the size of jurisdiction.
Okay. Committee, any questions or objections to the introduction of that bill? Seeing none, that bill is introduced. Any other from the audience? I think we had one there. Come on up and state your name and who you're with and the bill. Yeah.
Chairman Thompson and members of the committee, I'm Garrett Henson from the Office of the Attorney General. Today I would like to request that 25 RS 0490, a bill concerning firearms and the state's concealed carry program, be introduced.
Okay. Any questions or objections to the introduction of that bill? Seeing none, that bill is introduced. Thank you, Garrett. Any other bill introductions? Seeing none, Jason, I think we did that in less than a half an hour, so that was a good thing. We have today a hearing on Senate Concurrent Resolution 1602, and I'm going to ask our reviser, Jason, to go up and explain the difference, what this is, what it would do, and so that we have a good idea of what we're voting on with this particular resolution. Jason?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The resolution, SCR 1602, is pretty self-explanatory in terms of what the statement that the legislature is making with this resolution. The chairman, I believe, just wanted me, for the benefit of some of the newer members to the legislature this year, to explain what an SCR is compared to a simple resolution. Resolutions are not generally binding. They don't create law. They are generally just statements by the legislature, such as this one. A simple resolution, just a Senate resolution, upon adoption by the Senate, would then become formally published by the Senate. With a concurrent resolution, such as 1602, after adoption by the Senate by a simple majority, it would then be messaged over to the House and would go through the same process on the House side, just like a bill would, and would have to be adopted by a simple majority of the full House before it is formally published, and then enrolled copies would then be delivered to the individual specified at the end of the resolution. And so I just wanted to let the members who are new to the legislature understand how resolutions are different from bills and that they don't create law, more or less legislative statements, but that concurrent resolutions still follow that traditional bill process by having to be adopted by both chambers before being formally published. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jason. Committee, any questions on that? Senator Fausto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason, so, you know, we've done this often. Do we know if we've ever received replies from Washington, D.C., of who we are, you know, wanting them to hear the message of the resolution?
I'm not aware of such replies. I would presume they may take the form of a letter to leadership of the Kansas legislature if they were to reply at all, or perhaps a press release by the folks up in D.C. who are responding. But no, I don't think we've ever received any formal documents that were then later presented to a committee. I'm not aware of any such.
Senator Gossage.
Just a clarification, would the reply come from the governor, right? Because the resolution goes to the governor, not to the federal.
I would think that would be the case here because we're urging the governor to comply and fully cooperate with the administration in enforcing immigration law to the extent that she has the ability to do so.
So then I would rephrase the minority ranking member's question to, if I may, Jason, so have we ever had a reply from the governor for a resolution like this?
Again, I'm not aware of any such reply, and I would just point out that this resolution is set to also be delivered to each member of the Kansas congressional delegation as well as the president-elect.
Very good. Thank you.
Any other questions, committee? Seeing none, thank you, Jason. I appreciate it very much. The concurrent resolutions before you, there are a number of whereas statements that justify the necessity of this resolution. And again, as you can see, it's to encourage the governor to use lawful authority to help secure the border, including offering assistance through the Kansas National Guard, also to continue to support efforts aiming at securing our borders and reducing illegal immigration while fostering a legal immigration system that meets the needs of our state and our country. And finally, the Secretary of State shall send an enrolled copy of this resolution to Governor Laura Kelly, members of the Kansas congressional delegation, President Donald J. Trump, and relevant federal entities to promote awareness and collaboration of this vital issue. So this is encouraging the state to help with the fact that we've had, we don't even know how many illegal immigrants come across the border. So with that, I think we'll turn to our testimony. And up first, we have proponent in-person testimony from our Attorney General, Chris Kobach. Mr. General, welcome to Federal and State Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It's great to be back in front of you. This is one of my favorite committees to testify in front of. You guys are always on the forefront of some of the most interesting issues, and you've got a lot of talent on this committee and a lot of old friends and new friends as well. So looking forward to working with you this year. I'm not going to just recite my written testimony, but just want to give you a little bit of background and also be a resource for you. Many of you know that in my private practice, I litigated a lot of complex civil litigation cases involving immigration law, and also on the specific question of what states and localities can do without being preempted by the federal government and what they cannot do, which would be preempted by the federal government. So happy to answer your questions. I would just add a little bit of context here. President Trump has, of course, promised to reinstate enforcement of our immigration laws in a forceful way. He's also promised to reverse some of the Biden administration policies that actually were in violation of federal law. And I'm not exaggerating to say that, because Republican attorneys general proved that they were in violation of federal law in multiple federal courts. One of President Biden's first things he did on day one in 2021 is he issued an executive order creating a 100-day pause in deportation. Some of you may remember that. State of Texas, with a number of other state attorneys general signing on, brought the suit in federal court, and case went to the Fifth Circuit, and the courts agreed that the president doesn't have the authority to end deportations like that, or even to pause deportations. The most recent case was brought by Kansas. I led a coalition of more than a dozen states, and we brought this suit in North Dakota. And the issue was that the Biden administration was giving Obamacare benefits. It promulgated a rule, a formal federal regulation, to give Obamacare benefits to certain categories of illegal aliens. That violates the Affordable Care Act statute, which is what we colloquially call Obamacare. It violates the statute itself, which says that it cannot be given to an alien who is not lawfully present in the United States. And it also violates a 1996 statute found at 8 U.S.C. 1611, which prohibits the federal government from giving any federal public benefit to illegal aliens. Anyway, I argued the case myself. The district court judge agreed that the Biden rule was in violation of federal statute and put an injunction in place. And then in December, late December, on the 23rd, the Eighth Circuit agreed with the state of Kansas. The opposing Department of Justice had appealed, seeking a stay of the injunction, and we prevailed on that as well. So there are things that the new administration will be doing to reverse the policies in order to comply with federal law. Federal law obliges the federal government to do certain things and prohibits others. I will share a few statistics from my testimony. Illegal immigration costs taxpayers an average of $4,300 per illegal alien. Almost all of that falls at the state level. Immigration is one of those odd areas where the federal government has principal responsibility for enforcing this area of law, but the costs for failure to enforce fall predominantly on state governments. All of us bear those costs in Kansas state government. It's estimated, and these estimates are round numbers, but it's estimated that the current number of illegal aliens in Kansas is 104,000, according to the Federation for American Immigration Reform. And the total bill from 2023 in terms of state benefits or state resources that were consumed by illegal aliens was $603 million in 2023. I want to just jump to one other part of your resolution. I fully support the resolution. The resolution does not only talk to the governor. The resolution also speaks to the legislature. You speak to yourself, and it says, be it further resolved that the legislature will continue to support efforts to secure the border and reduce illegal immigration. That's at the top of page 2. I would encourage you to pass this resolution, which of course is your compass bearing. You're saying this is what we intend to do, but I would encourage you to go further than just this resolution and do what you say you're going to do, and that is pass legislation that you have full authority to pass. And let me give you some quick examples, and you will have the opportunity to vote on all 3 of these examples. Number 1 is you could require E-Verify for employers in Kansas. Approximately a dozen states already do that. It's working very well. Many of the largest Kansas employers already do. It's an online system. I won't get into detail now, but the employer can just go to a DHS website, verify that the person is either a U.S. citizen or is here legally and able to work. That would be something you can and should do if you seriously want to help the federal government address this problem. Number 2, you could end the giving of public benefits to illegal aliens. Congress, in that same 1996 statute I mentioned a moment ago, at section 1621 says that states are not supposed to provide public benefits to illegal aliens, but it doesn't provide any penalty for states that do. And so lots of states have, including Kansas. And Kansas is unfortunately, back in 2004, a very different Kansas legislature passed a statute giving in-state tuition benefits to illegal aliens. That is something that is in violation of federal law. There's no hammer, there's no penalty that the federal government imposes, but Kansas is currently in violation of federal law. I would encourage you to pass a statute, which will be coming before you, to end the giving of public benefits, including that one, to illegal aliens. And then a third example is 287G agreements. This refers to Section 287G of the Immigration and Nationality Act. It allows state and local law enforcement to have a number of officers trained or deputized. They can have remote training, or they can go to FLETC in Georgia, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, and can gain enough information to serve, to put on a deputy immigration enforcement hat when called upon. So if a law enforcement agency makes an arrest in a drug raid or something like this, and there are some people illegally in the country, they can collaborate with ICE and have access to ICE databases, take custody on behalf of ICE. A number of jurisdictions have done this in the past, and I would encourage you to compel your whatever universe of law enforcement jurisdictions you believe should do this, to do so. I will be having the Kansas Bureau of Investigation have a few officers trained up to get this authority, but you could certainly compel other local jurisdictions, if you so choose, to cooperate with the federal government. So there are ways for you to put your words into actions, and I stand ready to help and advise and tell you what you can and can't do if you're interested. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. General. Any questions from the committee? Senator Tyson, and then Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. Thank you, Mr. Attorney General.
My pleasure.
For everything you've done on this issue, especially. So E-Verify, we have passed that in the Senate for the last couple of years, and we always lose it. So thank you for standing up for that. Well, I'll be glad, I can't speak for everyone else, but I'll be glad to help on that issue however we can. The repealing of the in-state tuition, I am so excited to hear that. That was the first legislation I worked on as a legislator. We got it past the chamber I was in. The other chamber killed it. And so if we can get something done on that, you're right, it's against federal law. I do have a question for you. So we passed legislation a couple years ago on restricting IDs. We had Wyandotte County, or the city was giving out identification to illegals. And so we have that restriction in law. Well, I found out now there are some cities that are working around that by giving library cards, which it may not seem like much, but it's the first identity that is being used. So what would you suggest that we do? And I know that's a quick question off the top of your head if you want to come back.
No, I can absolutely answer that question. Okay. And in fact, Wyandotte County came and met with our office shortly after I became Attorney General to see if they were in violation of that state statute. And the state statute you drafted back in whatever it was, 2022, whenever, it's pretty narrow, and you're very specific. The legislature was very specific about the things that you were prohibiting. And because it's fairly specific, it's relatively easy to circumvent. So you might want to revisit that statute and maybe broaden the language a little bit, because you're absolutely right. A city that's determined to effectively give an ID card to an unlawfully present person can circumvent the statute the way it's written now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you mind your office helping with that language and helping us move on that?
Yeah, we certainly can. Please feel free to reach out. Yeah.
Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions were asked.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Senator Faustigato.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General Chris Kobach, we shook hands last night and again this morning. It's always good to see you. So the resolution at hand, is it specifically relating to addressing the issue at the border or deportation? And so in the deportation part, so if you have children that are at school and then their parents are deported that day, how would we handle that if in fact the children are born citizens of the state of Kansas?
So the a couple of questions. your resolution does address deportation. It says, urges the governor to use her authority, I'm paraphrasing, use her authority, I haven't memorized it, to assist the federal government in deporting to the extent that she has the authority to do so, something like that. So it does address deporting. ICE is very cognizant of families, and so they would never knowingly deport. First of all, deportation doesn't happen like that. It's not like the people are arrested and they're gone. It's a long process involving hearings, involving immigration court dates. And so it typically would not involve a surprise move where suddenly mom and dad are gone. Secondly, they do address family situations like that. And you are right, because of current policy that confers U.S. citizenship on people born in the United States, it is often the case that parents who are here unlawfully have a child who has U.S. citizenship. You might be interested to know, though, that under both Republican and Democrat administrations in Washington, deportation still occurs, or removal still does occur. The child in that case almost always has dual citizenship, because the majority of countries in the world have what's called birthline citizenship or birthright citizenship. So if your parents are of a certain country, then you automatically get citizenship of that country, in addition to your birthright citizenship in the United States. Bloodline citizenship versus birthright. So yeah, it happens. Oftentimes the whole family will be removed, and the kids, if they were born in the United States, have the absolute right to enter the United States whenever they want to. And so oftentimes when they turn age 16 or 18, they come back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So let's say that occurs, that family. So are you going to go to the school and get the kids, and then the parents decide the kids are going to be deported with me, or are we going to put them in foster care? What are we going to do with the kids?
Well, the family makes a decision at that time. And I've actually, this was, 20 years ago almost, worked trying to assist a family to see if there was some way, how they could, because they were willing to comply with the law. That meant that they had to go home, back to the country of origin, which in that case was Mexico, and they elected to keep the nuclear family together. And so they were going to go back, and then after the requisite number of years, reapply to come in legally. But the kids would be able to come in legally no matter what. So, that's a decision that ICE presents to the family. But the fact that one has children doesn't mean that the parents automatically suddenly are compliant with the law. So it's a difficult issue. But rest assured, ICE, I'm not aware of any case where ICE has just snatched the parents and then the kids come home from school and they're not there. It's a long process.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to kind of piggyback off that, just so if you were to look at the situation, say my wife and I robbed a bank, and you came and arrested me and my wife, and the kids were at school, would it be any different?
Actually, in that case, yeah, the U.S. citizens probably would be separated, because you would be held, but presumably you'd be held in custody for flight risk, and so you wouldn't be able to come home for dinner to the kids. So in many ways, in the immigration context, it's less likely to disrupt the family than that. But your analogy is a good one, yeah.
Any other questions? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you,
Senator.
Attorney General, for being here. Did you have any part in drafting this, or are you just here to?
I had no part in drafting your resolution. I'm just here to support it and suggest here are some ways you could, put some actual steps into practice.
So I appreciate that. And Mr. Chair, if I may, there's some references in the resolution to the Trump administration, and they say led by his border czar. You're familiar with the federal government. Do we have a border czar?
Yeah, it's interesting that we always get these czars. We get drug czars, we get border czars. I don't know why Russian royalty appears in our system, but yeah, technically I don't believe there is a position in federal statute referred to as border czar. I think it's a fancy name for someone whose probable title is likely to be senior advisor to the president or special advisor to the president, but statutorily, I don't believe the term border czar appears in federal statute. But we call them czars, even though they're really White House advisors.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. I used to consider myself the room number czar at the university.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Czarina. But,
So
So,
my
but I
kids,
think
my kids
we-
think of me as a grammar czar back at the house.
I think we do want to be careful about our language to make sure that it's clear. And then, do you see any concern about when we would send this based on whether the administration has been put in place?
Well, seeing as the fact that they're going to be in place, they will be in place on Monday, I think it's, likely that this will probably happen after the administration is already seated, so it probably wouldn't be a timing issue.
And then one more question. It talks about some states and local jurisdictions that have indicated they will resist the Trump administration efforts. They're talking both about securing the border and deporting illegal immigrants. I have heard concerns and states saying they don't want to be supportive regarding illegal immigrants. I have not heard states say that same thing about securing the border. Are you aware of any?
I haven't reviewed the statement. I think the one that people are probably most often thinking of is California, which has made a big public, their legislature has publicly talked about allocating money toward resisting federal government efforts to deport individuals. I don't know if they speak to the border or not. But I do think that if you create a sanctuary jurisdiction where you're shielding people from, or trying to shield people from deportation or arrest by ICE, you do have an effect on the border because it creates a magnet effect. People say, oh, well, if I can get across the border in California, I'll be home free. So it has a drawing effect.
Any other questions? Senator Thomas and Senator Frascado.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Attorney General, for being here. I have a question based off something that she had said in your response. So when we talk about border czar in this resolution and in other bills, since it's not in statute, would that have any impact on implementation of law or bills? Or does that need to change to be a little more uniform?
I don't think it would need to change because technically that's what the president is referring to this position as. It's not, you're not imposing any sort of obligation, attempting to impose any obligation upon the state or upon, you couldn't on the federal government. So, if you were doing something very specific and creating a legal obligation or duty, then I would say, yeah, you need to name the individual very specifically. But since it's a resolution, I don't think that would change the operation of it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I mean, if it's a big deal when we work this, or here, we could change it to the official title, I suppose.
I think, as far as I know, that is his official title.
Oh, and
You could say the, borders are in quotes as designated by President Trump, something like that.
Something like that. Senator Frascado, did you have another?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Attorney General. When you mentioned E-Verify, have you talked to business people here in the state of Kansas regarding that issue? I know a lot of them, for the goods and services that individuals who may not be legal provide for their businesses. What do you think?
Yeah, I have actually had a very interesting meeting with one of the largest meat packers in the state of Kansas a few months ago, and they have been using E-Verify for, I think, several years now, and it's working very well for them. You'd be surprised. Sometimes people assume that a certain company or a certain type of industry is trying to avoid complying with the law, but in fact, many are trying to comply with the law, and they're doing it very well. You'll see E-Verify signs sometimes on the walls when you go. I think McDonald's is one of them, and probably many other restaurants too. So I have spoken with businesses. It was already fairly easy. It's an internet-based program. I've gone through the tutorial. It takes like about an hour, and here's how you do it, here's how you log in, here's what you should do and when you do it. I don't think it's complicated at all. And so most businesses, all the businesses I'm aware of that I've spoken with have said, no, it's a piece of cake.
All righty. One more question, I think. Senator Tyson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to get stuck on E-Verify, but I have been E-Verified because of my work, and it is not cumbersome. I used to have concern because it was an 11% error rate in the database, but they have got that down considerably. It's, I think, 3-4% error rate now. So it is one of the best things that we could do. I agree. But the only thing we tried to do was for government employees and government contractors. That's what we had passed. Are you suggesting that we go broader?
I think you absolutely should go broader. You know, when I became Secretary of State back in 2011, I immediately, as the head of that agency, you know, used E-Verify for all contractors we used because I had the authority to do so, and for agency employees. I'm doing the same as Attorney General. But if you're just looking at contractors, you're hitting a fairly small percentage of Kansas businesses. I think the system is proven. It's been around for a long time now. It doesn't make sense to just limit it to contractors. You should go for all Kansas businesses.
Senator, thank you, Mr. General, for your testimony. We appreciate it very, very much. Up next, we have Robert Stewart from the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. Robert, welcome to Federal and State Affairs.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for having the KBI come testify today. My name is Bob Stewart. I'm the executive officer for the KBI. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the stats that we know, but quite frankly, it's more about the stats that we do not know. And I'll start off right off the top with that. You'll note in my written testimony that the KBI indicates there's approximately 75,000 illegal immigrants in the state of Kansas. The Attorney General just cited a number higher than that. Our numbers are several years old and are mainly from some old federal government databases that we have access to. When we've tried to get better numbers in the last couple of years, we simply get no better guess than what I just gave you. It's a difficult population to track by definition. These are folks coming in here that know that they are violating the law, and so they don't make themselves easily available to track in any meaningful way. So that's the start of the issue, quite frankly, is that it's a difficult population to track. One of the things we do know is that still the high percentage of illegal immigrants come from Mexico and Central America, although we see a trend, an upward trend coming from Asia, particularly from China. So those numbers are sort of in flux. China's bringing more and more in the last several years from the information we can see. Of course, you all know that immigration law is almost wholly captured by the federal government, and federal immigration law is almost wholly enforced by the federal government when it's enforced. To the extent that state and local law enforcement is involved, it really is at the level of, oh, we've got another crime that we're dealing with. In the process of identifying that person, we believe them not to be in legal status, either for an overstay or for bad paperwork on asylum, or they simply came across with no paperwork at all. And then the traditional method is local law enforcement of the KBI would notify federal immigration authorities and then operate based on what they told us to do. Most of the time, that is, let us know, we'll put that in our systems and process your state criminal case or your local case as you normally would, a traffic ticket, a felony arrest, whatever that might be. In some cases, though, they will put what's called a federal detainer on the person that's the illegal alien that's arrested for other things, and then they'll stay in custody. So a state judge or might say, okay, well, you have a $10,000 bond on the case that we have you on, but there's a federal detainer that's going to hold you until ICE comes and figures out whether they're going to move for deportation hearings or whether they're going to let you go off of their detainer. That's traditionally how it works, although in the last several years, there's been less and less of that where local and state law enforcement call our federal partners and get a response of, hey, we want to do a detainer, or hey, we're going to come out and interview them. That has happened less and less in the last few years. When I think about statistics that I can provide you, the place I would normally go would be to our KYBER system, the Kansas Incident-Based Reporting System, which the KBI tracks all information that comes in two particular areas. One, the standard offense report. So whenever law enforcement in the state of Kansas takes a report about a crime that's committed, that processes through, eventually comes to the KBI, and we can track that and give you statistics out of it. And we often do about crime trends and that sort of thing. And then the second, and the one that we always have, is the Kansas Standard Arrest Report. When we've arrested somebody, there's a form that's required that processes into the system and the KBI tracks. Now, if I try to query that system, that KYBER system, and I did to try and query it to see what was out there, there isn't a part of either of those systems that is a place where law enforcement would document status, immigration status in there. There's a field where you can fill something out, but it's hard to track and it's hard to trace. So I don't have numbers for you that say in this percentage of arrests in the state of Kansas, we dealt with people who were not legally documented to be in America. That doesn't exist inside the KBI system. It doesn't exist inside the FBI system as far as I can tell. And we tried to model ours after the federal system. So it's difficult to come and tell you, here's what the numbers are. Thus, it's difficult to say what percentage of people who are here illegally commit another illegal act. We simply don't know it. What we do know and what we can tell you are there are certain areas where it's very highly operated by folks that don't care about their immigration status, and that particularly is in the area of organized crime and in the area of international drug trafficking organizations. We at the KBI know, as do our state and local partners, as does the federal high-intensity drug trafficking area, tries to track those groups quite carefully. The vast majority of them, something like 85% of those international drug trafficking organizations, are from Mexico. Starting to see a few more from, and you've heard us testify about Chinese triads and coming in from other places, but the vast majority are from Mexico. We believe that the vast majority of those are from the Sinaloa cartel. The Sinaloa cartel people that law enforcement engages and touches are never documented United States citizens or permanent legal resident aliens. They're almost entirely undocumented and illegal and moving back across the border, not through obvious check stations, right? They're moving money and drugs. They're not going to go to the border entries and worry about that sort of thing. So we believe that that's a significant piece of at least what we see as the immigration problem. I would also talk to you very briefly about a new trend that we're seeing, just starting to touch on. It's a very violent group out of Venezuela called Tren de Aragua, and I'm probably messing up that last part of it, A-R-A-G-U-A. They started off as a prison gang in Venezuela. It got cracked down a little bit on Venezuela, so they've moved internationally. And one of the places they moved, of course, is the United States because of the porous open border. They started in Chicago. Now there's been a lot of information out there publicly there in Colorado. We believe we've had some contacts in state law enforcement and with our local partners that indicate we have some folks here that may be associated with Tren de Aragua. And it's a very violent gang. They're not just limited to drugs. They have intimidation. They have human trafficking. They have lots of pieces of their puzzle that we're still trying to get a handle on. And I put into my written testimony a citation to a news report out of Wichita that indicates that they're observing a large number of Venezuelan immigrants. Doesn't indicate whether they are legal or undocumented, just indicates that Wichita's seen a large influx of them. That concerns us because as a pretty uniquely Venezuelan gang, Tren de Aragua, we suspect probably you go where you know people. So they may very well be incorporating into the Wichita area, knowingly or unknowingly, to both our partners down there and to the rest of the community down there. That's one of the things that we find most difficult. That last thing I said, where these international drug trafficking organizations and now maybe these violent gangs, they're going to associate with the people they know, speak the language they know, live in the communities they know. We have a hard time tracking that which is legitimate immigration in legitimate communities and what's not legitimate. And that makes law enforcement more difficult to try and pull that apart and also to try and make it a harder environment for those drug traffickers, those violent criminals, to live and work in the state of Kansas. So with that, I'll stand for questions that you may have.
Thank you, Robert. Committee, any questions? Senator Fausto.
Yes, thank you. So, so let's say that you encounter that person who is not a citizen of Kansas. So, but they have lived maybe 50 years in a home, and they're operating and, kind of somewhat adding to the economy within that community where they live or city. So do you give any special consideration to a person who's lived, you know, maybe 64 years in, you know, and they don't know anything else other than that community in Wichita or Topeka.
Generally, our state law enforcement contact or our local law enforcement contact would be for another reason. We got called there for a domestic violence situation, or they're a witness to something that happened next door. In those situations, we normally wouldn't engage that level of conversation. It would be identifying them. What do they know? Are you a suspect? Do we need to challenge you as a suspect in a state crime? Or are you a witness? What else is going on? We would be keeping the peace at that level, not be thinking about the immigration aspects of it.
Any other questions? Senator Dodson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've gotten some conflicting information on driver's license and availability to illegals. Is that, are they able to get driver's licenses in Kansas? Or I've heard that some places aren't being as strict on our laws that we have implemented. And then the idea of a fake ID. I know you can pay $100 and get it really good. Can you address some of those issues?
I am not aware about the status of how the license acquisition process works in Kansas, and I don't know. I have not personally heard of the issue, nor am I aware of any of our executive staff knowing of that issue. We'll check. I do know that, for example, there are some states where, like California, it's relatively easy for anyone to get a driver's license, which would mean that a state highway patrolman in the state of Kansas might pull someone over and only have judged a person's identification by that California driver's license and wouldn't ask any further questions about immigration status, nor should they.
Sure.
Thank you. So I've got a lot of friends and families in western Kansas, and one of the issues that they're running in the small counties, communities, that there are people breaking the laws and they don't have a driver's license. They're driving illegally. Well, it turns out there are illegals here, Nicaragua, many different countries. What are we doing to address that?
Nothing from the KBI level. I know our local partners are doing what they can in local and state, local courts. They can charge them certainly with driving without a license, driving without insurance. That, of course, is not a binding, there's no, generally speaking, that's not something you hold somebody over for court in jail for. So a lot of those end up being no-shows in court, and then bench warrants issue, and they go into piles.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Stewart, for the testimony that's very detailed about what's happening. I'm wondering, this resolution talks about severe repercussions, and they include human trafficking, the deadly fentanyl crisis, and strains on public resources. Would fentanyl be something that the KBI is seeing as one of the most important, or are there other drug concerns that you're seeing?
The Mexican gangs, particularly that I talked about, they tend to be what we call poly-drug organizations. They don't drive down nice little lanes. So they certainly, they're capitalists. They're going to make money with whatever they can do. If it's selling fentanyl, if it's selling meth, if it's selling meth laced with fentanyl, if it's selling fentanyl laced with marijuana, they will provide, and if you need a gun, they'll give you one of those too. They really do pile on whatever they can sell you. So yes, it certainly does affect the operating environment in which we have to work when it's difficult to parse out the illegal drug dealers in all that pile.
And just, is the fentanyl crisis one of the biggest concerns that the KBI would have at this point?
Yes,
Or,
ma'am.
thank you.
Yeah. And from what I've heard, like from our law enforcement partners down in Oklahoma, they have the illegal marijuana grows and drug grows. They also have human and sex trafficking as a part of that. There's a lot of victims involved, these people who are here illegal and they have no protection. I don't know.
That's accurate. Our partners in Oklahoma have testified, as have we last year in session, about exactly that, sir, that when they come in to sell drugs, they bring in their own drug problems. Ketamine is a drug problem that traditionally hasn't been in the Midwest. Now it is, because the drug dealers in Mexico and China use ketamine as their drug of choice. So we have a ketamine problem now. They bring in sex slaves and sex trafficking. They bring in extortion. They're not playing by any set of rules whatsoever except whatever makes them happy and whatever makes them money. So those problems increase across the board, and certainly some of those people that are coming in that are being human trafficked aren't documented, and they're the victims of the sex trafficking.
Any more questions? One last question, Adam Thomas, Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I want to kind of bring this back home. We talk a lot about stories. I want to make absolutely clear, if you can answer this. The way I understand it is they're talking about specifically going after illegal aliens with a criminal record as their priority, and I believe it states that in this resolution, not some sort of door-to-door campaign asking people their immigration status. Would you be able to tell me if that's accurate?
I have not paid that much attention, quite frankly, with what the priorities of the Trump administration are moving forward. It stands to reason that your statement is accurate, and I think, generally speaking, that's my impression, but I would be uncomfortable averring that perfect, with my hand in the air.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I would assume giving state resources and local resources, that wouldn't be the case. That would be my assumption as well.
Certainly, any cooperative effort that we have would obviously have to be under our mandate, which is, to investigate violations of state criminal law.
Okay, thank you, Robert. We appreciate your testimony.
Yes, sir.
Committee, we also have written testimony from Caitlin Owens of America First Policy Institute. We have no neutral testimony. We have written opponent testimony from Doug Schlabel and Alejandro Arango Lopez. All this is available in your S drive, or for those who are looking and watching at home, it's available on the legislative website under the Fed and State Committee. So we will close the hearing on our Senate current resolution number 1602. Committee, I typically would leave this over for a day. We do have a little bit of time. If the committee is comfortable, we could, I would entertain a motion. Oh, is there? Yes, ma'am.
In the past, the chair has often said, does anyone else want to say something? May I address the committee shortly?
Oh, gosh. Well, I have closed the hearing. I didn't, we typically ask for somebody to, for sake of time management, to give us a 24-hour notice. It's on our conferee rules. So just for sake of time, I'm sorry I can't do that today.
When this was put on the calendar, but I didn't get notice until last week.
It was put on, I think we put it on the calendar as soon as we had it available. But I'm sorry. I appreciate, and certainly if you want to submit, in this case, since it's early in session, I'd allow you to submit some written testimony that we could consider and look at it. This will go through a process on the Senate floor, and then since it's a concurrent resolution, also on the House side. And so you'd certainly have to have the opportunity to see when it's coming across on the House side and make testimony over there. Okay, thank you. Senator?
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I'm
yes,
just
I'm sorry.
wondering if there's an opportunity. I'm going to look real quickly at the Senate calendar and make sure that it was on the calendar yesterday. I didn't note it, but I was paying attention to the state addresses. And I think that could make a difference, because if it's not on the calendar 24 hours ahead, how could anyone?
I know we submitted the agenda as soon as, this being the first week, we got it on the agenda very quickly, and I could check with our CA, but we did get it on the agenda. It's been on since Tuesday, I believe, Tuesday afternoon, I think. With the uploading of the agenda? Okay. So I'll have to check into that to see why it wasn't uploaded, see if there was any issue with that. And I apologize, we're running very late. But again, if we kick this out, it will go to the House for their approval as well. Like I said, yes, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think it would be interesting to discuss a few of the questions about the wording Right now, it talks about states and local jurisdictions indicating they will resist the efforts to secure the border. And I don't know that, I mean, deportation is clear. I don't know if that other question is. We're talking about his border czar, and I don't know if we should consider any other language regarding that. Because of that, I would appreciate
Having the time.
having the time.
Okay.
And then we could also review written testimony.
That would be fine. So what we'll do, rather than try to work this very quickly in the time we have left, which is just a few minutes, we'll go ahead and probably anticipate working this on Tuesday. And let everybody let this testimony marinate with you, and we'll go with that. That is all that we have today. We don't have meetings tomorrow or Monday, but we will resume our work on Tuesday. Thank you so much for all the testimony. Thank you for listening in and all the questions, committee. And with that, we are adjourned.